So now we're ready to actually start importing our footage, finally, into Final Cut Pro. This is definitely where having dual monitors or a big monitor comes in really handy, but I'm just doing everything on my MacBook screen for right now, so I can share it with you more easily. This is what I meant when I said I import my footage a little weird. What you can do, if you want to, is click this little import arrow, and then you can import all kinds of footage, decide how you want Final Cut to handle it. This is also what will pop up if you have Final Cut Pro open and you insert a memory card into your computer. This will automatically pop up and say, hey, what do you want to do with that footage? It's incredibly helpful. I don't use it at all. What I do is I just drag everything in one by one. So for example, right here, this FX3 clip, this is my main camera clip. So what I'm going to do is just drag that to my timeline directly. It's scary, I know, but I'm a rebel. I like to live dangerously. Once I've added something to my timeline, I right-click on it in the folder and then give it a red label, and now I know I've already used that clip. This becomes really helpful in projects that have a ton of footage. A lot of times if I do like a product review about something, I will have 100 different B-roll clips of that thing, and knowing which ones I've used and which ones I haven't used is very important, because in a long project, you know, if something's 20 or 30 minutes long, you might forget at 2 minutes, did I use this clip? And now at 24 minutes, am I going to be repeating it? And this just helps sort of keep things organized. So I'm gonna bring in the FX3 clip. The A7S III is my second camera, so I'm gonna bring that in. Now I've got both of my cameras added, and then the screen recording, I'm also going to bring that in. And for the most part, I just use QuickTime built into the Mac for screen recording. And so now we've got these 3 pieces of footage in here in Final Cut Pro. We can see our total project length is 31 minutes. And when we talked about background render, this little dotted line up here tells me that this footage is being rendered, it's being processed, because it was just added to Final Cut Pro. As it works through stuff, this will disappear. So anything that has this dotted line over it means that it's being rendered. Anything that doesn't is already rendered. So even though I just dragged and dropped everything directly to the timeline, that footage did go into my event 330 that I made. So if I scroll up here in the media browser, I can see all of these clips. They are there, so it ends up being structured and organized the same way that it normally would. I just like to manually add everything to the timeline. So now what we need to do is get our footage ready for a rough cut. What that means is doing some basic color correction, some basic audio adjustments, and some basic syncing. Final Cut does have a really cool multicam feature, and I'll actually put a link to a video I made that explains more about that. If you have multiple cameras, there's ways you can sync them all up and then just use your keyboard to switch between them on the fly, and it's super cool. The reason I'm not using that here is because I think that works really well for long form stuff like video podcasts or interviews. In this case, the reason that I have multiple angles is often used to hide mistakes. And so it's better to have that granular control where I can adjust everything and sort of cover up mistakes and jump cuts and things. So that's why I do that. Final Cut Pro does work in layers, which is why I put the FX3 layer on the bottom. That's my main angle, followed by the other 2. And what that means is if I wanted to delete this second layer, it would be the only thing I deleted. But if I deleted the bottom layer, everything else is connected to that, and so it's going to delete everything. So that is the foundation for the project. I'm going to select the other projects and just press V, and that's going to deactivate them. How this turned a little darker gray. I'm gonna select the other camera, press V. You can press V again to reactivate them. And that basically just keeps them there, but now we're not gonna see them or hear them. And we're gonna do some basic adjustments on this clip here. So the first thing I'm gonna look at is color correction and sort of framing and getting this shot to look perfect while it's all one shot here. I can make minor adjustments later on throughout the project, but we wanna kind of set ourselves up for success, right? So I try to get as much right in camera as possible in terms of color and exposure, and this looks fine. There's nothing wrong with the way things just automatically look, but I like things to just sort of be a little bit brighter and a little more saturated. And what I can do is click on the color option, and because I have it set to go to the color wheels, that's right where it goes. Normally by default, it will go to a color board, but I like color wheels. The way color wheels work is the right side is exposure, global is everything, it's the entire clip. Shadows will just be the darker parts of the clip, the highlights are just sort of the brighter parts, and then the midtones are the mid-range tones of the clip. The other slider is for saturation, so you can only saturate your midtones or your highlights or your shadows. That's a little too bright for me. We can go down here and adjust our color temperature. This is what we can do if we're working with log footage or raw footage. I just do everything in sort of the default picture profile on my camera, so nothing crazy. I'm not working with any log footage or anything here. And then you can also adjust some of the tints here. It's almost like playing with how the computer is handling certain colors. Do you want the shadows to be a little warmer? Do you want the shadows to be a little cooler? Do you want the highlights to be, lean towards the oranges and the reds or the pinks and the purples? So you can really fine tune things how you want. Color correcting, color grading, that is an entire career field. And I will be very upfront with you and let you know that the way I color correct things is I just move stuff around until I like the way that it looks. That's my secret. It's very, very technical, but I don't want you to think that's the only way you can do it in Final Cut Pro. So I will show you a couple of the more official, technically correct tools and methods, and then you can decide what you want to do. What I could do is go into the view option and show my video scopes. I can also press Command 7 to do that. And that's going to bring up these waveforms. We've got our primary colors right here. We can click on this little icon and see some different things. We can see a vector scope, we can see a histogram. All of these things help you understand your exposure and your color within your frame. So for example, if I go to the waveforms, I can now start playing with my exposure a little bit and try to keep them basically above 0 and then reduce the highlights below 100-ish. I have some really bright spots in this frame, so it's not going to be perfect, but in general, you kind of want to keep everything between 0 and 100 is sort of a basic rule of thumb. A very important thing when it comes to working with color on video is skin tone, because getting somebody's skin tone wrong immediately looks super weird. And this becomes really important if you are working with log footage where it's not giving you sort of baked in color information and you sort of need to dial things in specifically. This is why people use LUTs and things like that. So what we can do is we can go to the vector scope to adjust our skin tones. Right now we have this little mushy mess that just sort of shows everything, all of the colors and what they're doing. But if I go down here and I click on View Skin Tone Indicator, it's going to give me this line. Most skin tones, regardless of what color your skin is, has a lot of like reds and oranges and yellows in it in some degree, in some combination to make up whatever your skin tone is. Obviously, you need to use your judgment, and even if you have everything lined up perfectly and the person does not look like the person looks, make adjustments accordingly. But this is a really good guide to get things right. So instead of trying to just move colors around until the skin tone looks right, there's a nifty little trick you can do. If we go to our regular inspector and scroll down to crop, we can basically start cropping in on a piece of skin. This won't be awkward at all. I'm just going to crop in on a little square of my forehead in this frame. So this is just that FX3 main shot, and now that whole thing is just this little frame of my forehead. I could zoom in more if I wanted to, and whenever you zoom in, you'll see this little box right here, a gray box with a red one. The gray box is your entire frame, and the red one is what you're actually seeing, so we can move that around. Oh boy, there's my forehead. The reason I did that though is because now if we look at the vector scope, all of that swooshy, swirly mess of color is gone, and we only have one little line here, and we can kind of see that it's not quite on that skin tone line. So I can go back to my color wheels, and now I can start sort of messing around with these a little bit to try to bring that over to that line and adjust it a little bit. I can make it really intense and make the line bigger, but probably don't need to give myself a weird spray tan or anything. And now it looks like my skin tone is a little bit more accurate. So what we can do is we can go back over here, scroll down and deselect the crop, put our view back to fit, and now my skin tones should be a little more accurate in this frame. The problem for me though is even if that becomes a little bit more accurate and correct, if I undo that, I actually like the way it looked better before. So what I have done is I've created a preset. So I'm going to turn off Command 7. We're going to get rid of that for now. If I go into my effects panel and I go down to custom, I have these presets that I have created from different projects in the past. And I have one that is Sony full frame. So if I mouse over it, I can see what this clip would look like with that. And if I want to add it to the clip, I can either just drag it over here, or I can click on the clip and then double click this, and it will add it to that project. And what that did is it added a color board and color wheels. If I turn that off, that's what it looks like. And if I add those, that's what it looks like. So it's actually pretty subtle. I just sort of changed a little bit of the exposure and a little bit of the saturation, and that's pretty much it. In this case, I think I also want to make the color temperature a little bit cooler, so I'm going to go to 4700 from 5000. And now this is without that correction, and this is with that correction. One other thing that I want to change in this frame is my desk is a little bit crooked here, so I would like to fix that and align that. And to do that, I can click on View and Show Horizon, and this is going to put up this crosshair here, which is super helpful for just aligning stuff and framing things in specific ways. And to transform this, I can come over here and basically drag the y-axis up so the edge of the desk is here, and then I can play with the rotation a little bit. You can either just click and drag or type in numbers that you want. That looks like too much. Maybe it's like 0.7 would look. It looks like the edge of the desk is aligned pretty well with this straight line. So then what I can do is bring this back down, or even just type in 0 on the y-axis. However, now I have a new problem. Up here in the corner, because I rotated the frame, there's sort of this, the edge of the frame is cutting in there. So I'll need to zoom in a little bit, maybe like 104%. And now that looks pretty good. This is a pretty symmetrical shot. The crosshair has me right in the middle. So now we can take off the View, Show Horizon, and we have this shot here. I transformed it by zooming in and tilting it, and then we added some color correction as well. If you want to make your own preset, it is super simple. I will put a link where you can download mine if you want, but if you just want to make your own, all you need to do is take a shot, and not take a shot, that would be dangerous depending on the time of day. Take a frame, take a piece of footage, adjust it how you want with your exposure, your color correction, transformations, anything that you want on that. And when you have it how you like it, you just click Save Effects Preset. And then you can give it a name like Effect or whatever you want, and then decide what category you want it to be in. I created a new category and called it Custom, and that's where I know all of my custom effects, presets are saved. And then you can decide which things you want to do. So in this case, maybe I don't want to do the transformation effects, the ones where I tilted and zoomed in, but I want to change the color. Because in the future, I might have a clip that is already like framed perfectly, so I don't need to crop and tilt and rotate and stuff, but I do want to have the same color adjustment. So I can select what I want and then just save the effect. And then your category will just show up in your video effects, and you can just add everything right there. If you want to sort of refine these over time, you can right click on any of them and select Reveal in Finder, and then you will see all of your effects there. Oftentimes during projects, I might end up making 3 or 4 presets for that specific project that I will never use again once I'm done with it. So then I'll just delete them from here so they don't take up space in that menu.